How many brilliant people do you know who still haven't finished their damn book? The idea's there, the story's there, the mission is there, but the manuscript is still halfway finished in drafts. Today, we're asking the question, what does it actually take to finish the damn book? Especially when your story, your brand, and your business is basically relying on you to get it out there into the world. Today, I'm joined by Suzy Schaeffer, known as the Book Doula, who helps nonfiction authors publish books that bring together what she calls the trifecta: your story, your brand, and your community, all aligned to support your mission through cause publishing. She works with business authors, spiritual and faith based leaders, legacy storytellers, and anyone who feels called to share something meaningful in the world. Susie left the corporate world and took a leap of faith and became the first entrepreneur in her family. Since then, she has built not one, but two businesses, including a yoga studio rooted in local community. And recently, she went through a massive transition and lost her entire subscriber base, ground zero, which makes this conversation even more powerful because finishing the damn book isn't just about writing, it's about the resilience that comes with reinvention and what it takes to put forth your life's work into the world. Susie, welcome to Communication Queens.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this one.
Same here. So, what inspired you to just choose to work with authors and help them birth their book babies into the world?
Well, first of all, I've always had a love of reading and books. And after my corporate career was kind of winding down, was going through a divorce, and a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to learn the ins and outs of independent publishing. And so I jumped at the chance because for me, that was really exciting to be able to be part of an industry that I found so mysterious and creative and fun. And really, that's how I got started. And now I'm able to work with a variety of different people, anywhere from business leaders to veterans to inspirational people, to help them get their stories out into the world.
What is it about your process that mirrors birth?
Well, as you know, the doula is someone who helps you birth your baby. So, really, my process is about helping you birth your book because it's not easy. You go through months and months of, a roller coaster while you're waiting for the baby to be finished, right? And then you go through the birthing pains of actually launching your book. And it's not an easy task. And a lot of people think that they can just have it be your one and done. And there's a lot more involved in that. So my role really is to be of support and guidance and really be there for the author.
One of the things I've noticed with a lot of authors is that they really struggle with, like, if they get through the hurdle of writing the damn book, then it comes market the damn book.
Right.
And that's a whole other hurdle in and of itself. What are the big pitfalls that you see in a timeline sequence as far as like when authors start marketing their books too late in relation to their book launch? Or do you notice a correlation?
Yeah, really what happens in most cases is that authors wait too long to market their book. As soon as you have that cover design done, you need to be marketing your book with your coming soon campaign. Now, as far as I'm concerned, and in the industry, we never give an actual launch date because life happens. And so we wait until literally the author has books in their hand. They may have a couple of events already scheduled, but we really wait until that book is really ready before we actually do the launch. But usually the marketing needs to start midway through the process. Once you're in the phase of doing the production work, the design work, you should be marketing your book and getting it out there and already starting to schedule down the road, because a lot of times, as you know, getting on a podcast or getting an interview in some way sometimes can take 6 months
Yeah.
to get there. So you got to start doing the work early in the process.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very much like birth, which is why I love that you call yourself the book doula, because it's like when you're preparing to have a baby, you want to have the baby shower ideally before the baby gets there so
Yeah.
that you have some clothes and, a diaper, a changing pad, and the things that you need in order to steward the baby in life on the outside of you. And I think that's very similar with marketing is the marketing assets of the book cover, of your bio as an author, of you putting yourself out there are like those little mini baby showers that you're putting out to promote the book being birthed into the world.
Yes, and part of your marketing is also creating engagement with people. It is creating a fan base, so to speak, on your social media. It is about really fine-tuning your the book description, the back cover content, your bio as an author. You have that time to do those things if you start the process early. If you wait until you're basically ready to finish, the production stage of your book, you're behind the gun, and now suddenly things are rushed. And so having that extra time really does set you up for success. In addition, once you've launched your book, you're not done. Like that's just that's just the beginning part because now
Yep.
you're launching a book. Now you need to think about how do I get to be a bestseller? How do these things work? Who do I need to talk to next? How do I get into a bookstore? How do I approach libraries? There's so much that needs to happen.
Yeah, it really is that next step, and so many authors, they thrive in the creative space of the creation of the book, and instead of doing all the marketing pieces for the book, they're already on to writing the next book, which I'm like, "That's great." But if you want the next book to have any traction either, there are certain steps to take to be known as an author if you want to make this a career, if you want to have it be, or you may not even want to be have being an author be a career, but at least have your book making sales so that it's generating sales for your business as
Exactly.
well.
And you need to understand how you're going to use that book as a tool. Are you going after high end ideal clients for you, or are you looking to do a TEDx? Or are you using that book to negotiate in person speaking engagements? There's a lot of different things that you can use that book for. And if you look at the book as a marketing tool, yet you still have to market the book, which is the tool, it's kind of a round robin situation. So you really have to have a plan. In addition, you need resources, you need people. You're not going to spend all day long on social media or doing your own marketing usually.
Hope
So you need
not.
to make sure that you have a budget, that you have a plan, that you have people in place to do those tasks so that you can show up for your clients and for those speaking engagements and not be bogged down with the minutia of what happens in the background.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, because especially when you're thinking of spending money on a book, most people think of the cover and editing and maybe even a hybrid publisher or whatnot, but then there goes into the marketing of the book. So it really is a whole ecosystem that you are building out. And when we go through our authority asset audits with our clients on really looking at how to position their book as an authority piece that builds on the backbone of their business, so often I see the whole goal initially kind of stops at like, oh, well, the book's done. And I'm like, no, 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 that's step one. That's
Right.
maybe step two. We got to get beyond to once it's born. How are you going to steward that message? How are you going to steward that into furthering your income, furthering your career, whether that's as a speaker or an author or a coach or a service provider? Like, how does that book position you in a way that shines a light on what it is that you want to do in the world?
Exactly. And I think that a lot of people, when they write their book, they have not thought about all those aspects, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. That's why I like using the trifecta because we really break it down and we say, okay, let's talk about these things. Let's put these into these buckets so you can figure out how this book is going to elevate your business, elevate what you do and how you show up in the world. Because if you don't have that plan, you're going to be all over the
Oof.
place. And scattered energy, as we know, does not work well.
Yes, it doesn't drive anything forward. And I think the hardest conversation that I have with authors as well as you is I said, if we go by industry standard average and your book sells, and I say this not to dishearten you from writing it, from finishing, from doing it, but if it go we go by industry standard for self-published authors and your book sells 300 copies, how can we make sure that those 300 copies aren't just the end of the line? How can we make sure that those 300 copies, I was like, "It's 300 copies times $15." Like, I typically don't do math in public, but that that's not a high number for the ROI that you are pouring into the book. So what's
Exactly.
on the back end? And
So
so
it's
walk us through your trifecta of what you see how books really play in the longer game.
Yes. So, really, the first part is your story. What is your story about? Really kind of diving into that and saying, what is my story and why is it important? Why is someone going to want to understand what my story is? The second part is your brand. And so, how does your story connect with your brand? How does your story elevate your brand? And the third part is your community. Does your story connect with community? Does it create a new community for your business or how you show up in the world? Are you creating a movement? Are you speaking out about a certain topic that you want to drive awareness around? Like when you break it down and you look at those three things and then say, okay, now when we're talking about cause publishing, how do those three things support my mission or cause? Because if you don't have that connection, there's going to be a disconnect for the reader. And the reader is obviously going to be someone who potentially could be a client of yours or potentially could introduce you to the right clients. So you really have to think about those things and break it down. And it's not always about selling the number of books. It is about using that to get those clients because most times what we find is the investment that an author makes they can usually recover that ROI within 1 or 2 clients. So it's not about selling the books.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you can reframe that, it really frees up the author to think bigger and think outside the box instead of saying, "I've gotta sell 5,000 copies of my book." No, you don't. You need to get 1 or 2 new clients, and that's gonna cover the return on your investment. So
Mhm.
just thinking about it differently and then going back and looking at all those pieces in the trifecta and saying, okay, how do these connect? Or is there a disconnect? Or do I need to reframe this? Do I need to add more personal stories into my book that demonstrate the connection to mission and cause? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the personal stories are a huge piece in book publishing that I see a lot of self-published authors don't always do very well because there's a fear of the vulnerability. But when you can get really, really damn good at storytelling and you can lean in and you can shape the details, I mean, that's one of the feedbacks that I'm very honored to have had with my book, Make Every Podcast Want to, is people are coming up to me. They're like, I am learning so much, but your stories, like, I am just blown away. Like, I share about the story of how I had selective mutism for 6 months in kindergarten and I didn't speak. And I then wondered how could I make friends because my one friend got the flu and I learned this one piece of advice that I've taken with me throughout my business career, which was say hi to 10 people every day with their name.
Mm. Yeah. I think that sometimes what happens is we are afraid to share those stories about our lives. And then, of course, what happens with entrepreneurs in particular is imposter syndrome creeps up. And it's a very real thing, particularly for authors, because they are afraid of saying, well, why is my story unique? Who am I to talk about these things? I'm not an expert. And it's all the worthiness and self doubt that comes up for people instead of just saying, you know what? To heck with it. I'm just going to share my story. Haters beware, you know? It's fine because what happens is every time an author shares something that is a personal story about themselves, there is somebody that says that resonates with me or I can understand that. And so there's your connection.
Mm. I'm sure you've seen this as well is like it's very easy to shift to deflect and say, "Oh, my book is vulnerable because it's teaching vulnerability or it's teaching forgiveness or it's teaching open-heartedness or something like that." But you're going through the lens of teaching it rather than
Mhm.
demonstrating it.
Right.
So there's less of the lived authority. It's more like, "Here, you should do XYZ," versus, "Here, let me tell you a story about a
Hmm.
time that I was kind of an ass in my marriage." And I see this a lot with founders where we can get ourselves on this like pedestal of like being the teacher, but it actually prevents our audience from having that intimate connection with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really speaks to the where we're going as humanity. We are
Yeah.
really going towards this being truly authentic and not caring what other people think of us, right? I mean, you
Mhm.
if you're getting on a podcast and you're writing a book, then you really can't care about what people think of you because those
Yeah.
two things can't exist together. It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
And I think there is care, as in, like, you're not showing up in, like, sweats and, like, there's a level of care of, like, showing up in professionalism to a degree,
Sure.
but it's like, if you're gonna judge me on the context of what I'm saying,
Mhm.
or however else that is, like, that's I may not just be for you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
How do you guide your authors through those imposter syndrome moments and the fears of, like, one of the biggest fears that many of my clients face is the fear of rejection, and how do you navigate through that fear?
Well, we have a conversation about it. And I think once you start talking about it and once you're able to own that personal story and be authentic with yourself, then it's not so hard to share that with others. And the more that you talk about it or the more that you share what your experience has been, the easier it becomes. It's like anything in life, whether you've lost a loved one or you go through a divorce or a loss of a job or whatever happens, when you talk about it, you're like, okay, you know what? I was giving it way too much credit, way too much weight. So it really doesn't have that much of an impact because look at, I'm bouncing back and I'm doing the things, right? And I'm healing that. And so when you start talking about that with an author and say, you're free to talk about it with me because that is us healing that whatever's happened in their lives versus shoving it under the carpet and pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I think more and more people, especially where consciousness is going and humanity, we are wanting to see true authenticity. I shared about, like, we got like 100 submissions for people to come on this podcast, and so many of their bios. And I was like, I'm sure you're a pretty awesome person, but man, it's not being reflected in the language that you're using. Like, I am bored by your bio. And I think that humanity is just starving for, like, give me some soul, give me some grit. How do you extract that from your clients to help them have that resilience that they need to have to pour their true selves into the book?
Well, honestly, that's really where ghostwriters and editors come into play because that is their role. Like they really can ask those questions and help the author identify what are those really juicy pieces of their lives and their stories that make it worthwhile. And so even before sometimes an author will get to me, they have gone through that process. But what I do find is that sometimes then it comes out in things like their bios, right? Like their bio, they shrink back again. And I'm like, wait a
Mhm.
minute, where's that person? The person that told these stories, that's not coming through in your bio. That's really not coming through in as you authentically. So then we kind of go back and say, okay, let's talk a little bit about this. And sometimes even in the writing process, an author may want to expose a lot more and it's almost too much. And so we say, well, it's great that you wrote that because that is very therapeutic for you as an author. But now we don't really need to have all of that in there. We might even pull back a little bit and say, we don't have to have every single detail. But the process that the author goes through about writing that and sharing that is transformational. Uh, And so those are the kinds of things that I like to talk about with the author, especially when we're writing the bio and talking about their brand because you've got to show up authentically. Because if you're not authentic, then we might as well just consider using AI, right? Because
Right.
AI is basically the same written word without the soul.
Yep. And I think, speaking of AI, with the rise of so many AI books and so many authors using AI, but not, like, really disclosing that they're using AI, like, for me, I can smell AI from, like, a mile away.
Me
Like,
too.
you can see the pattern of the writing.
Mm,
And I will say it's different than the AI detectors, because, like, AI detectors are crap. Like,
mhm.
I put in a fully human written piece into an AI detector and it was like, "This is 90% AI." And I was like, "Well, then write it like a human." And it spit out the most absolute garbage that I could have. I was like, "A human that didn't pass 2nd grade, maybe."
Yep.
But looking at, how are you navigating with your authors how to use AI as a structural tool, but not actually using it to be to, like, because it is so easy to crutch down on it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that is part of my policies is that you cannot have more than 10% of your book can be AI generated. That just is a rule for me. And it keeps people honest because I say, we can tell the difference. And when you're working with an editor in particular, they're going to know. It is fine to go ahead and use AI to create an outline or to help you organize your thoughts, or even go in and proofread something that you've written. But if you're using it to actually create the content, that's a whole different ballgame. And so it does not have a place in the publishing world to use AI for content creation. Now, as far as your marketing goes, your social media, go for it because it is the thing that sometimes we can sound repetitive. And so AI
Mm.
will help us keep from sounding repetitive when you're trying to do the marketing part of the book. But the actual content that's written in the book needs to come from a human.
Yeah, and that's what we resonate with anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how we have that connection. Because even if you read something and you said, well, I can't quite tell if this is written by a person or AI. Well, guess what? Your subconscious knows. Your subconscious absolutely knows if that's generated or created by human. So I think that we're going to become more intelligent that way as humans. And AI has its place in a lot of ways, but it still has to be controlled by humans.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It can provide great outlines and guardrails for structure, especially for the ADHD authors who end up rewriting the same thing multiple times, not speaking pointing fingers at anyone, but me. But being able to provide that structure of like, oh, here's, the flow of this story leads into this story,
Yes.
but not writing the stories for you for sure. Because I think as soon as you go onto a podcast, like, as soon as you go on and start speaking on a show about your book, like, there's an energy about the pride and the resilience and the
Mm.
resistance that also you face as a writer that when you get to the other side, it's almost initiatory to be able to get to that other side and feel like, "Oh, who I became through that valley. Holy crap." Just going through the motions. When you are guiding your authors in facing resistance, do you have a framework for helping them just finish? Or is it just kinda being there cheering them on?
Yeah. So I am there to be their cheerleader, to be their support, to be, even though I'm not a therapist, there's a lot of therapy work in what I do. um, but usually the hardest part for them is getting through the writing and editing phase. That's the big lift, the heavy lift, right? Once they get through that, and I can tell them, I say, hey, look, you've done the hardest part. So now it becomes easy. So whether if I'm working with an author who really is in the initial phases of writing their book and we go through the trifecta and we work through the sticky note method to get them writing, that is sometimes where I have to kind of let them just muddle through some of the things that are difficult, right? But I'm here in the background supporting and encouraging them. Once they go into the editing phase, then I kind of take a back seat because I really want to make sure that I'm not in their head or in their ear, right? They need to work directly with that editor or ghostwriter in order to flush out all the stuff that they've been writing about. And then once that phase is done, then they come back to me and then we are celebrating because we've gotten to the point of having a finished draft of their book and it's going to go into that final proof edit. And then we start production. So really, it is about me being able to understand where are they at in the process? What do they need from me? And how much interaction do we need to have?
What do you find most authors need?
Most of them need permission to just
Mm,
get the book done, right? I would say that's 90% of the authors I work with. They've done some writing and they are just really feeling unsure about it. They are feeling a lack of confidence. And so I'm giving them permission to finish the damn book, right? Like saying, like, literally, you've come this far. Why would you not do this? And
yeah.
we go back to things like talking about their brand, their community, their story, and how those things connect to mission and purpose. It re energizes the whole conversation because now they're saying, "Oh, yeah, I guess I do need to finish this book because it can result in more revenue for me as a business, but it does set me apart as being unique and different in my industry or a thought leader or something like that." So sometimes it's about coming back around and just revisiting some of those things and saying, "Okay, Why are you doing this to begin with? Let's dive into that. And once they determine that, they just need permission to finish it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting that people struggle so much with needing permission to get their voice out into the world and that it has been squashed by so many people to say the question of who am I to write this? And then there's also the altruistic version of like, well, I just don't want to be, some other white woman just shouting out into the void. Like, and so there's the layers that we have on our own, what I call plagiarized programming of
Mhm.
how we interpret our own imposter syndrome or how we label it. But ultimately, they're all like shrouds of the ego just trying to put on different masks
Exactly.
from
And
actually being fully expressed.
I think that's particularly true for entrepreneurs because there's so many people out there that are leaving corporate structures and who have been marginalized in some way, and they're breaking into becoming an entrepreneur, becoming a thought leader, anything like that. But there's that whole, lack of confidence thing that happens, and it's a real thing that imposter syndrome really is real. And so, by doing a book, that is one of the probably, I'm going to say easiest, even though it's really not easy. It's one of the easiest ways for you to go ahead and build that confidence to move forward,
Mhm.
because there's so many things that are rooted in our own childhood, whether it's family, education, belief systems, religion, you name it. There's a lot of stuff that gets piled on us and makes us feel like we can't step into the world and do the work that we're here to do.
Yeah, and it's when we can actually just choose and give ourselves that permission of saying, "Well, I don't need the world's permission to finish this. I'm gonna choose to do this.
Right.
Period, full stop, because I want to." I think there's something that's so beautiful and true when we can actually just lean into the desires of our heart that I believe were placed there by the divine. That's like, yeah, your voice is valid, your
Hmm.
stories are needed, and so go forth and put it into the world. I
Exactly.
mean, and I hear so many entrepreneurs, especially those who are impact driven, who are like, well, if it impacts just one person. And would you say it's a construct of the ego that's like, they say they just want it for one person if it just impacts one person, but really it's like their brain is like on a stage in front of thousands and thousands of people. And so they're talking one thing and saying, oh, if it's just for one person, but they're when they say one person, they think thousands.
Well, I think that whole idea of it, if it impacts one person, is a programmed construct of what
Mm,
we've been told and taught, right? Because that's the right thing to say and the right thing to do. When really, it's like, no, I'm doing this. If you really look at it, why are you doing this? If it's your ego, then you're saying, yeah, it's because I want to be in front of thousands of people. But ego is not a bad thing. If it is for yourself, you're saying, I'm doing this because in order for me to heal that wound in myself, I need to be shouting this from the rooftops. That's a whole different thing. So it really depends on where are you at in this process? Like what's going on with you? What healing work have you done and what still needs to be healed? But that's all part of us learning to become confident in what we say and what we do and how we put ourselves out there.
and I think, what if that one person is you? Like,
Right.
is that so wrong that it doesn't impact anybody else except for just bringing you joy and the feeling of satisfaction that you completed something hard? It's like I think of writing a book sometimes is kind of like running a marathon. It's like you're
Mhm.
not doing that for anybody else. Like that's just 100% for
Exactly.
who you become in the process.
Exactly. And there's only three top, finishing places, first, second, and third. So if you're running the marathon and you're not going to make it first, second, and third, are you just going to say, I'm not going to do it just because I'm not going to make first, second, or third? No, you're still going to run the marathon because there's something deeply rooted in you that says, I want to run the marathon. Right.
Yeah.
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 So it all just comes back to what is that person? What's going on with that person when they're writing the book? Why do they need to share this story? What's important for them? And it's always a deeper rooted issue. Always.
Yeah. And I always find that the marketing side, like once they've kind of healed, it just cycles back around.
Yep.
Like the healing of like, here's the other lessons. Have you really integrated these?
Hmm.
Because this is the next level of learning that we are going to experience as we go into the marketing and sharing about it.
Yes. And
And
that's
that,
a lot of times that's why people write 2 and 3. I say books are like tattoos. Once you get one, you're going to do another one, right? So that's what happens is they've reached a milestone. They can say, "Oh my gosh, I published a book." And then they're like, "Oh, but I have more to say."
yeah.
Great. So write another book, right? And I do find that it quite often happens. And it might be
Oh, yeah.
a different book. I'm not talking about necessarily a sequel, but suddenly somebody who's written about something in their life, and then they go, wow, now that I've kind of come through that, and oh, I came out okay. I'm not dead, right? I'm okay. Now I want to talk about this topic. And now I want to talk about this topic. And so this is how we are seen also as not just one-dimensional people, have multiple aspects to our lives. We do different things. Like, yes, I do publishing, but I also have a podcast. And I also just opened recently a yoga studio. And, I love to do all those things. So that's what happens when you start to heal those places in your past, in your psyche, in your emotional state. Then suddenly it just opens the doors and say, hey, can do anything I want to. And now I've gained the confidence in order to do those things. So writing a book is just the first step. The world is your oyster. So step into it.
I love that books are like tattoos.
Yeah.
Very true.
I don't have any tattoos, but I have many friends who have tattoos and they've always said the same thing. They said, yeah, once you get one, you just can't stop.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone who has multiple tattoos, yeah, I would definitely
So
agree
you
with
know.
that. I know. What would be one thing that you would say about that you wish you saw more of with authors for how they market and get their book out into the world once it's done? Once they finish the
Oh,
damn book and it's done, what is one thing that you wish you saw more of, that you wish you saw more authors like seize and run with?
I would love to see more authors take the marketing aspect more seriously and to really think about what is the benefit to me having a team or someone on staff or someone even it doesn't have to be somebody in, your front facing client facing situation. Usually these are people that are in the background. But if you can relieve the pressure of doing that, then you are able to really focus on what the whole purpose of your business is. It just is such a relief. Like my clients, they don't talk to the people that do my bookkeeping or my CFO or any of that. Like they don't even know those people exist, but they do. They're all in the background because I'm the face of my business. And so my clients get me. And that's what's
Mhm.
important because that's authentic, right? When I'm sending a potential client a proposal, I'm going through that myself because I want to make sure that the conversation that we have resonates in that written material. So I think that a lot of authors are afraid to invest in themselves by having a marketing slash PR team. And I think that would really behoove authors to understand that if you put that into your budget, you will come out of this a lot better off and a lot happier and a lot less stressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And with a lot more book sales, with a lot more impact, it definitely is worthwhile an investment. Either you build the team or you hire someone who has already built it,
Yes.
because it truly, truly, truly will help with the launch. It will help you feel more supported. And ideally, you want somebody, because I've hired bad marketing teams when I had my e-com company. So I know the difference of hiring a company that's a true partner that like really like is deeply invested and wants to see you succeed, or a marketing team where you're just another number, you're just another sale, you're just
Yeah.
in the machine. Preferably go with the former. Go with
Yeah.
somebody who deeply cares, who wants to partner with you, who wants to see you and your book succeed and support you in the vision for what you have for the long term.
Exactly. It's got to be somebody that is also going to show up authentically and be of support and understands the big picture. I mean, I honestly went through that recently with my podcast where my producer had to take a step back due to medical issues. And I basically I went into shutdown mode. I was like, okay, it was over the holidays. And I just said, I can't even deal with this right now. And so I took a step back and took a little hiatus and then reached out to a friend of mine who actually was a former author that I worked with. And she and I always kind of just had this really strong connection. And I said to her, your podcast is doing really well. Like, how do you feel about being the producer for mine? And she says, oh my gosh, I love this idea. And I've had amazing results just in the last couple of weeks, just from making that shift. So it was about bringing the right person into the mix and
Fill the right role.
yeah. So authors have the same opportunity. You got to figure out, okay, who's the right person for this job? It isn't necessarily going to be your sister or your mom or even a best friend, right? It's going to be somebody who has that skill set and enjoys doing that work. That's
Mhm.
the difference. So, yeah,
Yeah. Susie, you and I can keep talking because, man, we know.
we know.
We
Yeah,
know.
we know.
If there is one thing that you want to leave our audience with when it comes to encouraging them to finish their damn book and just have the permission, beyond permission, like what would that be that you would say to them?
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, talk to somebody. Don't just keep letting this roll around in your head. Talk to somebody, have a conversation. And someone that's in the industry that is a professional that can help you see the big picture for your book,
Yeah.
really. Because once you can see the big picture and how it fits in to your business, to your client base, however that works, it will light a fire under you. And we just stepped into the year of the fire horse. And honestly, that is what this is all about. So find that fiery passion and go for it. So that's my best advice is just get some help where you need it.
Let's do it. Where can our audience find you? How can we work with you to help birth our books into the world?
Yes. You can find me at finishthebookpublishing.com, all one word. And on my website, it talks the story about the pineapple. It tells you all the things that I offer my clients. It's got information about clients I've worked with. And there's, of course, a consultation button. Consultation's always free.
Amazing. Susie, thank you so much for coming on the Communication Queen podcast. I mean, such a valuable resource for our listeners who I know either have books in their heart that they have yet to produce, or they have a half-written book in their Scrivener file that they are wanting to birth into this world, or they're already published authors and they're wanting to go for that second baby and get that out into the world, but do it in a different way that actually aligns with what makes your soul feel happy. So thank you so much for being part of this. As always, my fellow communication queens and kings, your story is powerful and has the power to save at least one life. So go out there and let your voice be heard. I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. For more tips on guest podcasting, storytelling, and communication strategies, follow us on social media at Communication Queens Agency and visit us at communicationqueens.com. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And in the meantime, remember, your story has the power to save one life. Let your story and your voice be heard.